Real Men Feel with Andy Grant encourages men to allow and express all of their emotions. Despite what you may have been told, all emotions do serve you. All links mentioned in each episode are in the show notes found on the blog at realmenfeel.org. Now let's get to it. Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Real Men Feel, and welcome to 2021. We made it. Woohoo! New month, new year. If it suits you, a new you, perhaps, right? So I'm your host. I'm a coach, author, and healer, Andy Grant. 2020 has been a really rough year for so many people. Wouldn't it be great if we could find a way to bring more fun into our lives? Well, that's why I'm excited to have my guest today. He is positive play coach Jeff Harry, and he's here to talk about adding play back into our lives, making 2021 fun. And so, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. This is super exciting.
It is, and is super exciting. Is that part of play? Is play ever not exciting?
Yeah, play is feeling curious, right? It's like feeling curious about like what is possible and also feeling hopeful. And, tying this to the podcast, it's also allowing yourself to feel, right? I think a lot of what happened in 2020 is we had these high expectations of what we thought 2020 was going to be like. And adults are really good at getting fixated on the results. And then when 2020 didn't happen the way we wanted it to happen, it was so disappointing and we couldn't let that go. But being able to actually like feel and let it mourn and be like, hey, 2020 is now gone, and feeling it the whole way through is going to be really important to do in order to have a really vibrant 2021.
So play isn't about denying or ignoring something. It really lets you feel more of what might be happening.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the stuff I do around positive psychology is about like feeling all the feelings. Like if you remember Pixar's Inside Out, it's like you don't deny yourself the feelings. Like Tuesdays with Morrie is just like you feel the whole feeling. A perfect example of that is like when my dad passed away in 2015, his brothers showed up. His brothers hadn't seen each other since their mom passed away, which was like 20 to 25 years before then. And they all showed up for the first time together in that much period of time. So I'm surrounded by family, right? And I'm feeling grief and sadness, but also I'm feeling joy and gratitude. And at first I was like, oh, should I feel guilty about this? But it was like, no, you can actually feel both. I could feel gratitude and sadness, joy, and, a deep like mourning, and that actually makes life even more worth living because you're feeling all the feels and you're not denying yourself the feelings.
Cool. So we've established what play is. I always like to set definitions so we can talk about the right things. And
so the set definition, I define it because I both define it in a very like global and also narrow sense. I define play as any joyful act you do where you forget about time, where there is no purpose, there is no result, right? You don't have anxiety about the future. You don't have regrets about the past. You are just fully in the moment. You are fully in love with the process. And you're at play because time just disappears,
Cool. So no purpose. You're not focused on the results. Yeah, I've had years of struggle with depression and suicidal ideology. And one thing I discovered in my own life was like, I also love amusement parks. And on a roller coaster, you're in that moment. Like I could not be afraid or concerned. I could be afraid, but not about something else. Yeah.
Yeah. Even like, I think Daniel Tosh was like, you never see someone angry on a jet ski. Like you just can't be, frustrated. Right. So how do we spend more time? I'm putting this together for 2021 is like, I don't believe in resolutions anymore. Most people give up their resolutions by January, I think 12th. By like 11 days. But I have this thing called the Fun Joy Play Index where I'm like, reflect on what were the most fun, joyful play moments of 2020. Because if you think about it, your favorite moments in your life are usually play moments, right? And then even though I know it's scared to plan, right? But even though, think about what type of fun, joy, play moments do you want to have in 2021? Even if it's still going to be virtual, what type of memories do you want to create? Because more focusing on that rather than focusing on like what accomplishments or results you're going to achieve, you know, those actually don't bring you happiness. You know, they don't bring you a sense of joy and fulfillment. You know, Michael Phelps, there's just a documentary done on him and a bunch of Olympians, went to huge depression right after he won his, 22nd gold medal, because like he was so results oriented for so long and so fixated on results that when that went away, he was like, what is my purpose?
Right.
So we really have to be careful about how much we're fixated on results and really focused on what can we do to be in the moment and be in the process.
Right. And one of the old cliches, you know, enjoy the journey, not the destination. Yeah. So making your journey fun and playful, let that be enjoyed, and not only goals and results. And that almost the end of something is there, as Phelps experienced, like the end can be disappointing.
Yeah, well,
you keep striving for something, and then is like a cliff. There's such a drop off.
Yeah, it's also it's this myth that happiness is around the corner, right? That as soon as I reach $1 million of net worth, or as soon as I reach this accomplishment, and as soon as I'm Forbes under 40 or whatever thing you're trying to accomplish, then I'll be happy. Then I'll be joyful. And it's such a lie, right? It's such the lie. Like I remember like VH1's Behind the Music, you know, when they would interview bands, and bands would be like, what is your favorite time of your life, you know, with your band? And they were like, when we were in our crappy van, you know, driving from gig to gig where there was like only 7 people there. Because it was natural. It was at the beginning. It was during the process. You ask that of startups. A lot of them loved it when they were in their garage just trying to brainstorm what was next, right? It wasn't in the result, because if you're so fixated on the result, you're going to be so disappointed when you get there.
That strikes me as just so sad.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I talk about this a lot, of something I refer to as affluent deadness. Like I know a lot of famous people. I know a lot of rich people. I know a lot of, you know, successful people, right? There is a certain deadness in their eyes when you look at them, especially the rich, right? Like the elite. And either, where's that deadness coming from? They're either worried about losing all their money, right? Like that they've hoarded. They either are really sad because they thought that when they got to this place, they would be fulfilled, and they're not. Or the worst is they compare themselves to someone else. So they might have a net worth of 5 million, but someone has a net worth of 10 million. So it's never enough. It's like insatiable, you know, so they have this deadness in their eyes. And then the worst part about it is some of them then on Instagram post about how happy they are in their life. When you ask them afterwards, like, why are you posting that? It's like, well, it's the only time in which I get validation. So then they're selling a lie to everybody else, so that everyone's trying to race up there only to be disappointed again. So no one is happy wherever they're at. And if you look at someone that is truly joyful, truly fulfilled, they're happy in the moment. They're able to conjure up, you know, play in the moment. And if you think of, you know, one of the last regrets of the dying, it is, I wish I had the courage to live the life that I wanted to live, and not the life that others expected of me. Most people are, as Viola Davis says, chasing their worth, trying to get validation from others, instead of just trying to figure out, like, what makes me happy? What makes me fulfilled? What brings me joy? What is my play in the world? How do I want to show up? And if you can figure that out, you'll be far ahead of most people that, you know, have riches beyond belief, but don't know what to do with them.
Yeah. It reminds me of, I think Teddy Roosevelt said this: comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah. And I also add, expectations are the thief of joy, you know, like really, like we had think about it. So many people were like, 2020 is going to be my year. This is the year, right? You know, 10x my business, you know, get married, all these things. And when it didn't happen, because we were so fixated on it, that is where so much of our hurt comes from. That's where so much of our pain comes from, is because what we've done, which is so sad, is like, we've set it up where instead of just appreciating all the opportunities in front of me, right? Like when you're traveling and you're like, what do you want to do today? And you're like, I don't know, just so many options, right? We instead we fixate on one option, only one out of the million options that are in front of us. And if we don't get that, then we're disappointed. It's like, man, you missed out on 999,000 other options that all would have been great. That all would have been amazing. So I think something to do as we're walking into 2021 is to just be open to the possibilities, be curious, and not really be so fixated on achieving just one result, and just be more curious about what brings me joy.
Have you always been this curious, joyful kid and adult, or did you, discover play as a ways to get back into that, or was it always naturally there for you?
I think it was naturally there when I was a kid, right? Like everyone, and then I got through my, I went through the cool stage, and when I was in the teens, and I was rejected profusely. I was this Vincentian Filipino kid with a big afro, right? And everyone needed to have bangs in order to be cool. So like I used to put mousse in my hair and try to make my bang only for it to turn into a raccoon's butt coming out of my forehead by fifth period. So, I tried to be cool, and it sucked, right? Like I tried to get external validation, and I got rejected over and over and over again, to the point that I felt like I was denying who I was. And there was a moment, I was at this pool party where, I was like forced to choose who I am, or choose to be someone that was cool. And I chose to be someone that was cool. And I had never felt like more abandoned and alone in my life at that moment. And that is when I made the decision to be like, I'm just going to be a nerd, man, and just like play in my basement and make up games and, create a safe space for other people to do that. And then my friends would come over, and what's ironic is then people would just come over to my house to play and just be nerdy. And frankly, that's what I do now, right? I create a psychologically safe space for people to be themselves, using play.
So what is a positive play coach?
So positive psychology is it's research that was founded back in 1980 by Marty Seligman. He's a professor out of UPenn, where he found that most psychology up until the 80s had studied what was wrong with people. Like, here's everything that's wrong with you, and here's how to change it. But no one was focused on what we're doing right. Like nobody. So positive psychology, a lot of it is about just double downing on what you're good at, right? And allowing yourself to feel all the feelings. So I started studying a lot of that. I had already been doing a lot of team building events. I grew, one of the largest Lego inspired STEM organizations like in the US. And as part of that, we got the attention of Facebook, Google, Adobe, all these organizations that all talked about agility and disruption and innovation and thinking outside the box and all those buzzwords, all those things, all those posters that are on the wall, right? But they weren't doing any of it, right? It wasn't a psychologically safe space to take a risk. Like they just weren't doing any of that. So I had been running for over a decade team building events with them to make them feel good. And I was like, nah, man, I don't want to do that anymore. So, studying positive psychology and using my play background, I'm now like helping teams to navigate really difficult conversations using play, because that's the only way you create a psychologically safe work environment, right? Like, how do you deal with toxicity at work? How do you deal with talking about race or class at work? How do you dealing with your inner critic? How do you get your staff in flow? All these like questions that I feel a lot of companies just avoid. I'm like, no, let's use play and positive psychology. Just like go right at it.
So is all play positive or only some aspects of play?
No, I mean, play sometimes could be something as simple as running a marathon. When you're running it, parts of it, you're like, what in the world am I doing? Like, this is painful, right? But there's a part of you that is also like, ooh, I feel like I'm expanding. I feel like, I'm feeling a certain level of joy or interest, right? I remember I was coaching this one person who was a lawyer, and she's like, I don't play. Like, and I never play. I refuse to play, and I was like, okay, well, tell me what you do enjoy doing, or what do you do for work? And she's like, I take people that hate each other and I get them to agree on one thing, Like that's what interests me. And I'm like, oh, tell me more. And she was telling me, she started lighting up, right? And Howard Thurman says, the quote, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive. Because what the world needs is for more people to come alive. And when she was speaking, she was alive. She was excited about what she's able to do with people. And I was like, that's your play. So play is very broad. It's different for every person. So it's just, again, it's just the joyful act where you forget about time and it doesn't have a purpose. You just enjoy it for the sake of enjoying it. Like, even if someone didn't pay you, you would still do it, that is that work that is like, that's your flow work, or as Marcus Buckingham refers to as your red thread work.
So why do most adults resist the notion of play?
The easiest way to answer this, and also this is so sad, dude, but like, the easiest way to answer is 148,000 no's. By the time you reach the age of 18, you have heard the word no 148,000 times, according to studies. And you've only heard the word yes maybe 8 to 10,000 times. So you first have that you have to just deal with that, right? Then when you're a kid, you are should on all the time. You're should on by your parents, you're should on by teachers, should on by adults. I mean, literally you're 6 years old and someone's like, you know what you should do when you grow up? And you're like, I'm six. Why are you telling me what I need to do right now? Is it because you are having anxiety about your life and now you're shoulding on me as a kid? Then you get your teen years where you're bombarded with media, especially now for a lot of teenagers. And you get more information in a day than people got in the 1950s in a year. And that information is all telling you you're not enough, you're worthless. And you know what would make you happy? More Amazon Prime gift boxes, right? Like, buy this, get this webinar, do this thing. But whatever you do, don't do you. Don't be you, right? All of it is communicating not to be you. And then anytime you're mischievous, anytime you're yourself, you're told you're too mischievous, too much, too weird. So that, frankly, anytime you do any level of play, it's such a rebellious, revolutionary act, to be yourself against the society that's telling you not to be. Like, it's so big. So when you try something like starting a podcast and people are like, that makes no sense. Why are you starting a podcast? Why are you creating this video? It doesn't have an ROI to it. Like, what are you doing? Why are you hopping? What are you doing jumping on 100 podcasts in 9 months? What's the value in that? Like, it's just like, I don't know. I'm just following my curiosity because it feels good to me. Right? Like, why can't we just do that? Why? I remember going to a winery once and I was like, look, dude, I don't know anything about wine. And he was just like, look, man, you drink it. If you like it, you keep drinking it. If you don't like it, you stop drinking it. Like, it's that simple in life, but we make everything so complicated, right? We're just like, well, I should do this or I should do that. Why do you have to should anything? Like, just do what brings you joy, happiness. And if you don't know what that is, then take some time to explore that, because I feel like that is more important to you than most things in life.
So is kind of an aspect of play saying yes to yourself?
Yeah. I mean, think about when you've traveled, right? And you are just saying yes to everything. You're just like, yes, I will go here. Yes, I will hop on this moped of this random stranger. Yes, I will go to this deserted island. And all of a sudden I'm at a party, underneath the moon. And then I meet the love of my life. Like, yes. Like, just, I mean, it's not following like the whole yes and approach of improv, but it's just being open to stuff, right? I think a lot of times Elizabeth Gilbert says this a lot, well, she says two things. One is she says, don't follow your passion, because maybe you don't have a passion or purpose, but you can follow your curiosity, right? You can be friends with yourself. Like, everyone's like, you got to love yourself. You got to love yourself. She's like, let me just be friends with myself. Let me just start there. Like, that's, so just like following whatever is interesting you. What is your curiosity? But the other thing that she says that really resonates with me is personal transformation doesn't happen until you get tired of your own BS, right? So it's just like, what is the BS that I'm telling myself right now? I remember in March, my BS was March of last year. My BS was, I don't have time to make videos. I just don't have enough time. And then quarantine happened. It was just like, guess what? You have all the time in the world, and now I can make a video a day. sometimes I make 3 or 4 videos a day. So it's just like, we need to challenge what BS we're telling ourselves to keep ourselves small so that we can actually explore what like magic's within us.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned yes and being an improv exercise, but I think it really is fitting because life is the ultimate improv. Like everything is improv. So if you can, you know, even if you're afraid of the idea of being on stage or doing anything, but if you can see that, like decide this is my stage and you know, what do I want to say yes to and to. You know?
And think about it. Think about how you plan your life in such a linear fashion. Go back in your life and just look at it. Nothing is linear. None of it has been linear. Like even how we met, it's just like so many random things had to happen so that you and I were on this podcast together. So why are we planning everything out? Especially when it doesn't play out that way anyway. I'm not saying don't do any planning, but just be open to the possibilities that are out there and don't deny yourself, you know, your ability to follow your curiosity and follow what your inner child is telling you.
Yeah, I find it's about attachment. Here's my plan, but don't be, oh no, if it varies, I'm screwed. It can't be that attachment to it, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. You mentioned the inner critic a number of times and all the shoulds and the no's that we hear. So do you have a favorite way to kind of quiet that inner critic?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So my friend Marcia Chandor taught me this, and it really is about naming your inner critic. So I created a workshop called Playing with Your Inner Critic, and anyone can do this. This is super simple. You can do this at home anytime. So the next time you're feeling crappy, just like really bad, your inner critic has been there for a while, right? It's been hanging out with you. So all of this is about awareness. So you first like kind of recognize, okay, what has my inner critic been telling me since I started binge watching Netflix today, right? Like what is it telling me at this very moment? And then you just start writing all of it down. Like, oh, you know, you're never going to be successful. Oh, you're super lazy. Oh, you're always going to be broke. Oh, you'll always be alone. Like write it down, like write it on a piece of paper, put it on a computer. But the important part is to write it down so you can actually see what your inner critic is saying. It's a really big deal to shine a light on an inner critic in order to quiet it. But then as you're writing it down, start to think about what is that inner critic's voice sound like, you know, and then what does that inner critic look like? Does it look like, you know, your bully from 3rd grade? Does it look like all the cool kids from high school? Does it look like your parents, your uncle? Like who's saying this to you right now? Because usually it is some character or amalgamation of characters that are saying all these mean things to you. So once you identify what it's saying, what it looks like, what it sounds like, then you name it. And this is the power of it right here. So mine is named Gargamel. So Gargamel from like the Smurfs shows up and it's just like, Jeff, you suck. You know, you always be broke. Your business is going to suck. Like you're just never going to be successful. And at that very moment, I can do 2 things, right? I can internalize and believe him, or I can just turn to Gargamel and be like, wait a minute. You know, well, you're saying I'm broke. Well, my bank account doesn't say that, right? You're saying I'm never going to be successful. Actually, I'm already been quite successful. Here are the reasons why. You know, like, so you start to respond to it. Or the other thing you can do if you want to have your friends help you is you can actually text your friends what Gargamel is saying, what your inner critic is saying. And as soon as you shine a light on it, it starts to quiet. It starts to get really quiet over time. And you have to keep practicing this. You know, this is something you do over months, maybe even years of keep practicing, recognizing your inner critic, recognizing it's not you. It's you from like 3rd grade or from traumatic 13 years old or whatever time that needs love, but you don't hate on it. You just simply give it its attention. You go, thank you. I appreciate that you're saying this stuff. I realize you're saying this to protect me, but this is not necessary right now. So, you know, you need to sit in the back because you're not driving this vehicle anymore, right? Cool. And then as soon as you do that, then you go back to that list of all the things that were so negative and you flip them, you know? So you go, instead of I'm always going to be broke, to be like, you know, I'm going to be in abundance, right? You know, I'm going to be alone. Actually, I'm surrounded by people that I love. Like, and you start to flip those and you start to read those back to you more and more. Woo! All of a sudden, your inner child starts to show up, that quiet voice that voice that you know, because it's the one that's like, you got this, do it. You know, when you're feeling brave and you start to hear more of that, you start to strengthen your ability to listen to your intuition and not listen to outside voices, including your inner critic. And then you really start to feel empowered. And that is where, when I say follow your curiosity, it's follow that inner child and what that inner child is whispering to you.
Yeah. Beautiful. You know, this, you're reminding me, I want to speak to the power of this exercise, the simplicity and the power. So, God, at least 16 years ago, early in the 2000s, the first time I had come across anyone calling themselves a life coach, when I was like, what does that even mean? I don't, life coach, what the hell is that? But I met a guy, I'll shout him out. Peter Beckwith was the first coach I ever had. And we did this exercise, and I drew my inner critic and I named him, and mine was freaking Danny DeVito as the Penguin at Batman. He was that. So I called, he would check in. I was like, how's DeVito doing this week? Oh my God, he's all over me. I fucking hate that bastard. You know? But yeah, I have the picture I drew even somewhere still. Like, dude,
I came across it powerful, right? And then you're like, and then you start to laugh at it.
Yes, that's the key.
What's up, DeVito? How are you? Oh, same, because my friend Marsha Chandor says this a lot. It's just like your inner critic has a playlist of maybe 4 or 5 songs. That's it. And they, after a while, get really boring because they're just old songs being played. Yeah. So once you realize those songs are being played, you're like, oh, I don't want to listen to those songs anymore.
Yep. It's cool. And, you know, you mentioned being weird earlier, and I was, you know, embrace the weird. And when I was a kid, my grandmother told me that I had weird friends. And at like 8 years old, I said, well, weird friends are the fun of life. And now as an adult, I have my own coffee mug that says weird friends are the fun of life. And that's so awesome. True. Right.
That is so true. Yeah. Because what is weird, right? It's actually, I wrote an article about this. So look this up. Weird comes from, I believe it's the Latin term of weird, W-Y-R-D, which is, and I'll look at this up at some point, but it's this idea of embracing more of like who actually you are, right? Oh, here, weird is a concept in Anglo-Saxon culture roughly corresponding to fate or personal destiny. It's actually about like you fulfilling who you are, you know, which is fascinating to me. So here's a play exercise that you can do with your friends, your weird friends, that actually is super helpful, especially when you're like, well, I don't know how to play, right? Or I haven't played in a really long time. What should I do? I recommend you call up 3 to 5 of your closest friends. You can also do this on social media, but it's important to call these people, 3 to 5, your most important people in your life. And you ask them these 2 questions. What value do I bring to your life? Like, why are we friends? Because I think a lot of times we don't know what value we bring to people's lives. And it's amazing to just hear that love back. So what value do I bring to your life? And then the second question is, when have you seen me most alive? And another way of asking that is, when have you seen me most playful, most engaged, most present, most creative? All those things fall under the umbrella of, when have you seen me come most alive? And what value do I bring to your life? And when you get the answers from many different people, 3 to 5 different people, and maybe even some people on social media, you start to be like, oh yeah, those are the ways. Oh man, I haven't done that in a long time. I haven't played myself with, you know, in those ways in such a long period of time. You write all of those down, and then you can get on a Zoom call with a bunch of your friends, you know, and you can have a tipsy storm with them, where however you want to get tipsy, alcohol, chocolate, you know, whatever you do, you, right? But then you brainstorm look, I have all these ideas now. What should I do? And you get a bunch of suggestions from them. You write them all down on a whiteboard or something. You go to bed, get over your hangover, wake up in the morning, and then circle the one that most resonates with you and just simply do that, and have your friends help you pursue that. And simply doing that exercise, you start to realize all these ways in which you already are playing.
Cool. And taken on without attachment, that can be a really playful exercise in itself.
Right.
You know, that reconnection, that reaching out, finding, again, and virtual ways to play. You mentioned that earlier. So that's
and just learning more about yourself, right? Yeah. Like learning about what part of you is the lover, what part of you is the magician, what part of you is the warrior. Like it's like all in there. And you're just like, wow, I never realized this. So, or I did know this about myself. So it's really comforting to know that my friends also see that in me.
Right. Yeah. Some people probably, and well, just let me own that. I've had times where, well, I can accept that I'm really good at this, but I don't think anybody notices or cares about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. In your work with corporations or individual clients, do you see differences between men and women in their willingness to play?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so I think of, I talked about this most recently, so men and women both have, masculine energy or masculine leadership styles, and also feminine leadership styles or feminine power, right? And a lot of masculine power is, it's very list oriented, it's very decision making, it's very results oriented, which also is important, it gets things done. But it can also at times be very arrogant, or it can be very, and very fixed mindset, right? While a lot of like feminine leadership, it's much more adaptable. It's a little bit more resilient. It's more playful, right? So finding balance between those is really important. And I look at the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who both led with both masculine and feminine leadership. And that is a huge reason why they have the lowest COVID rates like in the world, because she both was empathetic, but also very clear with her community, with her citizens, of like, this is what we have to do. So I think we have to explore what parts of a person, what parts of you are more masculine, what parts of you are more feminine, and not deny yourself either, but try to find the actual balance. I think a lot of times, especially in the corporate world, we celebrate masculine leadership, and sometimes it turns into toxic masculine leadership, like Steve Jobs, and just like, really mean, and we gotta squeeze the most out of people. But if you look at someone like Tony Hsieh, who created Zappos, dude, that dude led from like a very balanced masculine and feminine, sometimes more feminine than masculine leadership style, where he cared more about his employees than his customers, to the point, and he allowed his staff to be weird at work, like to show up however they wanted to show up. And that was a huge reason why they thrived. So like I say to a lot of companies when they're like, well, why is play important at work? I don't think it's really important. It's just like, well, the future's where the fun is, right? And if you look at the organizations that are having the most fun, Netflix, Disney Plus right now, Hulu's, like all of, TikTok, all of these, they're taking risks and they're adapting and they're resilient, but most importantly, they're solving really cool issues and they're having fun doing it. Yeah. And that is where you want to gravitate as a business, because that's where the money is. And if you're still doing those antiquated ways of the past, or if you want to get back to normal, pre-pandemic normal, you might become the Blockbuster of the future.
Cool. Very cool. Very cool. Now, you shared a number of ways that people can, some techniques and practices that people can help get in touch with more play at the start of this. So at the start of this year, while we're still in January, what are you looking forward to this year? What are you creating but unattached to? Like, where is your curiosity wanting to go?
I'm looking forward to this pact that I made with myself, which is a risk a day. This idea that I can't believe I'm quoting, We Bought a Zoo. Remember that from that movie, We Bought a Zoo? It's probably not a good movie, but there's an amazing line in that movie where it's just like, where the father's talking to his son and he goes, this is how I met your mother. It was like, just all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage. Just like literally, insane bravery. And you take that risk and your whole life can change. So I think about that when we're like, I always say to people, I'm like, you're one risk away. You're one choice away, one risk. So I'm fascinated with taking a risk a day. And I don't know what that even looks like, but I think it's like simply when something is both exciting for me and also scares the crap out of me, then I'm like, ooh, I got to do that.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can just do that today. Let me just email that person I'm really scared to email. Let me just make that video that I'm really worried that if I post it, no one's going to like it, or maybe people will hate me for it. Let me just do this thing that explores my curiosity, because by simply doing that, I'm strengthening my ability to take risks and my ability to sit in the unknown, like to sit in the uncertainty. And I think Will Smith said this, after he bungee jumped out of a helicopter above the Grand Canyon. Everyone's like, "You're crazy." And he goes, "Man," when he came to the ground and they were like, "What was it like?" And he goes, "On the opposite side of fear is everything. Everything you've always wanted. It's just on the opposite side. It's right there. Yep. It's just waiting for you. All the excitement, the roller coaster ride is right there if you simply are willing to take that risk."
Yeah. Yep. I've found that time and time again. So now I try to live my life that when fear shows up, it's not a stop sign anymore. I see fear as the go sign, like run into that fear, like you were saying.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. So, Jeff, I really appreciate everything you've shared so far, everything you're doing, everything you're looking forward to. What's the best way for people to connect with you, to learn more?
Sure. The best way is to simply go to rediscoveryourplay.com, click on the Let's Play button, where I have a bunch of play experiments you can do to figure out who you are. And then let's hop on a call and we can figure out how you can kick ass in this world.
Super. Everyone listening, please take the time, do the exercise about the inner critic, do the exercise of contacting your closest friends and asking those 3 questions. This will pay off. Whether you're listening to this in January of 2021, whether you're listening to it, July 4th of 2030, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And can I goodwill you hunt your staff as we close out?
Sure.
So if you remember Good Will Hunting, right? At the end of it, Matt Damon is sitting there with Ben Affleck at a construction site. And for people that don't know the movie, Matt Damon is this genius and he can have any job he wants, becoming a millionaire. And he's sitting at this construction site with Ben Affleck. And Ben's like, "When are you going to take one of these high paying jobs?" And Matt's like, "I'm not, I am going to work construction with you. We're going to raise our kids, watch them play baseball at Foley Field. And that's just what I'm going to do." And Ben turns to him, or his actor, the actor, right? He turns to him and he goes, "If I see you here in 20 years, I am going to kill you. Like, I'm literally going to kill you." And Matt Damon's character is like, what do I owe it to myself? And he's like, "No, you don't owe it to yourself. You owe it to me. You owe it to everyone else at this construction site that would give anything, I mean anything, to have, what you have. You're sitting on a winning lottery ticket and you're too scared to cash that in." And I truly believe this for each and every one of your listeners. They are sitting on a winning lottery ticket. And here's the most powerful part. It's not just important for them to cash it in for themselves, but it is important for anyone, for them to do it so that when they show up, it gives other people permission to show up. Like, you don't create this podcast, Andy. I don't have the ability to show up myself. Now you've given this platform for so many of us to show up. Now I'm sharing this message, so this other person needs to show up, because by you simply showing up, people are waiting for you. They are waiting to do their thing, but they can't do their thing until you do your thing.
Right.
And if you want to make it a huge impact on this world, all you have to do is simply be you and show up. So, are you ready to show up?
Beautiful. I love it. I agree with it 1000%. There's this notion that it's selfish, play, joy, all that is something like, no, it's selfless. Like, you shining your light gives everyone permission to do that. You live in your passion, your joy, your curiosity. It helps the entire world. It really does. Awesome. Yes. Well, let's keep helping the world. Everyone listening, go help the world by helping yourself, by playing, by bringing joy into your life. All the links mentioned, all the resources will be at realmenfeel.org. I invite you to look at it that you have made it through the worst year of your life. And what are you going to do now? And Jeff and I invite you to play. Cool. I
love that.
Until next time, be good to yourself. Thank you for listening to Real Men Feel. Contact us at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Learn more about author, coach, and healer Andy Grant at theandygrant.com. If you enjoyed this episode, it would help us greatly if you gave a review wherever you are listening right now.